There are moments when talking about God at work feels complicated. We fear what others might think, being judged, labeled as fanatics, or even worried that it could affect our professional relationships. However, what many people don't realize is that when you choose to mention God in your workplace, things begin to happen that go far beyond what the eye can see. It's not just about words, it's about opening an invisible door that can bring peace, purpose, and hope to those who need it most. Today I want to share with you what happens when you bring the name of God into that space where you spend so many hours of your life. You may think that no one is listening, that your testimony makes no difference, or that your faith won't change anything there. But the Lord works in surprising ways, even in the most unexpected places. Imagine for a moment that, without you knowing it, someone next to you at work is carrying a heavy emotional burden, feeling lonely, lost, or without a way out. Your words, your example, and your decision to share God's light can become the relief that person has been silently praying for. Speaking about God at work isn't an obligation forced upon you. It's a privilege and an opportunity to be an instrument for planting seeds of faith and hope. Before we begin, I want to invite you to support this video. Give it a like, leave your comment, and share it. You may not realize it, but when you do that, you help YouTube recommend this content to more people who need to hear this message. For many of them, this space may be the only place where they can connect with God, and with such a simple gesture, you'll be part of that blessing. I encourage you to leave this phrase in the comments as a sign of faith and commitment. I carry light today. It's a short but powerful phrase because it declares that today you choose to carry the light of God wherever you go, even into your workplace. Part 1. The power of a silent testimony at work. When we think about speaking of God at work, most people imagine long speeches, formal conversations about faith, or even awkward moments where we feel we have to convince others. But the truth is, the very first step to sharing God in your workplace doesn't begin with words. It begins with your silent testimony. This testimony is the light you radiate through your actions, the way you treat others, and the way you respond to the challenges of your daily routine. We often believe that evangelizing always means preaching out loud, but Jesus taught us something far deeper. Our lives should be like an open letter for everyone to read. In the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 5, verse 16, it says, "Let your light so shine before men, that they may see your good works and glorify your Father in heaven." This means that before we say a single word about God, our light is already speaking on our behalf. Think about it. Every workday is filled with small decisions. How you respond when a colleague talks to you in anger, how you act when things don't go as planned, how you handle mistakes, pressure, or even gossip. Each of these moments is an opportunity to show the peace, patience, and hope that come from God. It's easy to say we believe in the Lord, but it's far more powerful to show it when no one expects it. Imagine a coworker who is quick-tempered, someone who easily loses control under stress. In that environment, a person who remains calm, responds with respect, and shows self-control, someone who doesn't allow anger to take over, immediately stands out. That quiet, peaceful attitude in the middle of tension can spark curiosity in others, making them wonder where that calmness comes from. In that moment, your life becomes the first message of God they encounter. Being an example doesn't mean being perfect, it means being genuine. We all face struggles, frustrations, and temptations, but staying firm in faith, showing humility when you make mistakes, and refusing to let circumstances extinguish your hope leaves a mark on those around you. Some people may never open a Bible, but they will observe the living Bible displayed in the way you live. The Apostle Peter wrote in his first letter, chapter 3, verse 1, about the power of testimony, that some who do not believe may be won over without a word, simply by the conduct they see. Although Peter was speaking about family relationships, the principle applies to every human connection. There are hearts that open to God, not by what they hear, but by what they witness. At work, your testimony can be more impactful than you realize. Sometimes it's enough to remain honest in an environment where others choose shortcuts, to work with excellence when others just do the minimum, or to show kindness and respect to the person everyone else ignores. Every one of these actions reflects the presence of God in your life and often has more power than any speech could ever have. Ask yourself this: has anyone at your workplace ever told you that there's something different about you? That's evidence that the light of Christ is already shining through you. It's not about thinking you're better than anyone else. It's about letting the love of God be visible in your life. That silent testimony is the very first step to opening the door to deeper conversations about faith. Not everyone will react positively right away. Some may feel uncomfortable, others may even mock you. But remember what Jesus said in Matthew chapter 5, verse 11, "Blessed are you when they revile and persecute you and say all kinds of evil against you falsely for my sake." This means that your effort to live out genuine faith never goes unnoticed by God, even when others don't value it. Speaking of God at work doesn't always start with a sermon. It begins with a heart that's willing to show love and goodness through actions. That's why the first step to transforming your workplace doesn't require a microphone or a stage. It only requires your choice to be a light in the middle of the routine. So think about your workplace now. Every gesture, every word, every attitude is like planting a seed. Some co-workers will notice and wonder why you're different. That will be the moment your example opens the door to naturally share about the Lord without forcing anything. This is the first great lesson of what happens when you speak about God at work. Even before you say a single word, your life is already speaking for you. And when your conduct honors the Lord, He Himself prepares the hearts of those around you to receive the message of salvation. Part 2. Overcoming the fear of speaking about God at work. One of the greatest challenges believers face when they feel called to share God in their workplace is fear. This fear can take many forms: fear of being rejected, fear of being mocked, fear of being labeled as overly religious, or even fear of creating tension in an environment that often prefers to stay neutral. These fears are real and understandable, but they should never become chains that keep us from bringing light where it's most needed. Fear often starts with thoughts like, what if they reject me? What if my boss doesn't approve? What if my co-workers laugh at me? These questions can become so loud in our minds that we stay silent instead of speaking. But God's word reminds us of a liberating truth. In 2 Timothy chapter 1, verse 7, it says, "For God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind." This means that fear does not come from God. If He has placed you in that workplace, He has also equipped you with the courage, love, and wisdom to be a light there. Imagine a believer who feels prompted to invite a co-worker to a Bible study, but that inner voice of fear says it's safer to stay quiet. Or think of someone who notices a colleague going through a personal crisis and feels the urge to pray for them, yet decides not to because they fear judgment. Every time fear stops us, a seed of hope goes unplanted. The fear of rejection is common, but we need to remember that the message we share is not about us, it's about God. Jesus Himself warned in John chapter 15, verse 18, "If the world hates you, know that it hated me before it hated you." In other words, when we face resistance for sharing about God, it's not personal. It's part of the natural opposition that exists toward the things of God. Another common fear is the fear of not knowing what to say. We sometimes feel unprepared or worry that we don't know the Bible well enough, or that we won't be able to answer difficult questions. But Jesus reassured His disciples in Matthew chapter 10, verse 19, "Do not worry about how or what you should speak, for it will be given to you in that hour what you should speak." God never expects us to have all the answers. He asks us to be willing and to trust His Spirit to guide our words in the right moment. Now, overcoming fear doesn't mean being reckless or insensitive. The Bible also teaches us to be wise as serpents and gentle as doves. This means we should seek the right moment, use the right tone, and show respect when sharing our faith. It's not about forcing conversations or turning every lunch break into a sermon, but about staying open to the opportunities the Lord brings naturally. A practical step to overcome fear is to start small. You don't have to begin with a bold declaration of faith. Sometimes all it takes is showing genuine interest in others, listening to their struggles, offering encouragement, and letting them see over time that your source of hope is God. People are often more willing to hear about your faith when they feel seen and valued first. It's also crucial to remember that it's not our job to change anyone's heart. That's the work of the Holy Spirit. Our role is to be the vessel God uses to plant the seed, and that truth alone removes much of the pressure we feel. We find a comforting example in Acts chapter 18, where Paul arrived in Corinth feeling weak and fearful. Yet God spoke to him in a vision saying, "Do not be afraid. Keep on speaking. Do not be silent, for I am with you." The same God who encouraged Paul is the one who encourages you today to not be afraid, to speak when he prompts you, trusting that he is by your side in your workplace. Another way to defeat fear is by remembering why we do it and who we're doing it for. If our motivation is to please people, criticism will quickly discourage us. But when our motive is to honor God, fear loses its grip. The Apostle Paul expressed this in Galatians chapter 1 verse 10, "Am I now seeking the approval of man or of God? If I were still trying to please man, I would not be a servant of Christ." It's also vital to accept that not everyone will respond positively. Some may listen with interest, some may ignore the message, and others may reject it. But as Isaiah chapter 55 verse 11 says, "So is my word that goes out from my mouth. It will not return to me empty, but will accomplish what I desire and achieve the purpose for which I sent it." That promise assures us that every word spoken in God's name will have an impact, even if we never see the results ourselves. Speaking about God at work is not about being fearless. It's about being obedient despite the fear. Every time you choose to trust God and share even a simple word of hope, you open the door for His word to do what only He can do. Part 3. How to recognize the right opportunities to speak about God at work. One of the most common questions believers ask is, when is the right moment to speak about God at work? This concern makes sense. No one wants to make others uncomfortable or create tension in a place where people expect professionalism and routine. But God teaches us that there is a time for everything, and learning to recognize the right moments can mean the difference between a message that is ignored and a seed of hope planted in someone's heart. Ecclesiastes chapter 3 verse 1 reminds us, "To everything there is a season, a time for every purpose under heaven." This truth teaches us that not all opportunities are equal. We need to learn how to notice when someone's heart is ready to hear words of faith. The first step to finding the right opportunity is to observe carefully. We can get so caught up in our daily tasks that we fail to notice the signs people give us. Look at your co-workers. Is there someone who seems quieter than usual? Someone who looks worried or distracted? Someone dealing with family issues, health struggles, or financial stress? These are often quiet signals that they may be seeking comfort, even if they don't say it out loud. Jesus was a master at recognizing these moments. For example, in John chapter 4, we read about his encounter with the Samaritan woman at the well. He didn't begin with a sermon. He started with something as simple as asking her for water. That simple everyday request opened the door to talk about the living water. This teaches us that many opportunities to speak about God arise in ordinary moments, during a coffee break, a walk to the parking lot, or even in a casual conversation about how the weekend went. The second step is to develop spiritual sensitivity. Not everyone is ready to hear about God at all times, but the Holy Spirit can guide us to know when to speak and when to simply listen. James chapter 1 verse 5 says, "If any of you lacks wisdom, let him ask of God, who gives generously to all without reproach, and it will be given to him." Before starting a conversation about faith, ask the Lord for discernment to sense whether the person is open at that moment or whether it's better to wait. Another key is to show genuine interest in people's lives. Opportunities often open up when we first build trust. Take time to listen to your co-workers, ask about their families, and show empathy when they share struggles. When people feel that you truly care, they are much more willing to open their hearts. Imagine a typical lunch break. Co-workers often share personal stories, challenges at home, stress about bills, or worries about their health. If you take the time to listen carefully and respond with kind, uplifting words instead of criticism or indifference, they will feel safe with you. That simple act of empathy can naturally lead to a conversation where you mention the hope you have in God. When you do speak about God, use simple, relatable words. You don't need complicated theological terms or long explanations. Often, a short statement like, "I went through something similar, and praying about it gave me peace," can be far more effective than a long speech. Real experiences resonate more deeply with people than formal arguments. Being present in someone's time of need can also create powerful opportunities. For example, if a colleague is going through a family crisis or dealing with illness, this could be the perfect time to offer comfort, perhaps saying something as simple as, "I'll be praying for you." Most people rarely feel offended by a sincere and compassionate offer like that. We should also remember that our actions can speak even louder than words. Something as small as writing a short note of encouragement, sharing a Bible verse for strength, or offering to help with a heavy workload can make a big impact. These gestures often spark curiosity. Someone may ask, "Why are you so kind?" And in that question lies the perfect opening to share your faith. The Apostle Paul gave wise counsel in Colossians chapter 4, verses 5 and 6. "Walk in wisdom toward those who are outside, redeeming the time. Let your speech always be with grace, seasoned with salt, that you may know how you ought to answer each one." This verse reminds us to speak with grace and to be thoughtful about timing, tone, and approach when we talk about God. Think of a co-worker who struggles with constant stress due to work pressures. They might not be ready for a deep conversation about salvation, but they could be encouraged by hearing a simple verse about finding peace in difficult times, or by you sharing how you've learned to trust God under pressure. Such words often feel more like genuine support than an intrusion. We sometimes believe we need a perfect, well-prepared speech to impact someone, but in reality, the Holy Spirit can use even the simplest words at just the right moment to touch a heart. The key is to stay attentive and ready for those ordinary opportunities that God turns into something extraordinary. Finally, remember that recognizing the right moments doesn't mean waiting for everything to be perfect. It means being willing to step out in faith when the opportunity presents itself, trusting that God is the one preparing hearts to receive the message. Speaking about God at work doesn't have to feel forced when your life, your words, and your actions align with His love. When you act naturally and let your faith flow through kindness and empathy, the message is received more openly, and it often leaves a deeper and longer-lasting impression than you might realize. Part 4. Staying firm in your faith when facing opposition and criticism at work. One of the toughest challenges for any believer who decides to speak about God at work is dealing with direct opposition, unfair criticism, or even mockery. Sometimes it's just a light-hearted joke, but other times it can be harsh comments that sting or attitudes that make you feel as if your faith is unwelcome. In those moments, it's easy to start questioning yourself. Is it worth it to keep showing my faith? Should I just stay quiet to avoid problems? Am I doing something wrong? The truth is, you are not alone in this struggle. Jesus Himself warned His followers that they would face resistance. In John chapter 15, verse 20, He said, "Remember the word that I said to you, a servant is not greater than his master. If they persecuted me, they will also persecute you." This reminds us that opposition isn't a sign that we're failing. It's a sign that the light of our faith often unsettles the darkness around us. It's important to understand that standing firm in your faith doesn't mean being argumentative or confrontational. Defending what you believe is not about fighting with those who disagree. The Apostle Paul advised in Romans chapter 12, verse 18, "If it is possible, as much as depends on you, live peaceably with all men." This means that as believers, we should seek peace with everyone, even with those who don't share our beliefs, without compromising the values that define us. One of the most powerful tools for staying firm is gentleness. We often confuse strength with the need to respond sharply or defensively, but Jesus taught that true strength is revealed in calmness and self-control. In Matthew chapter 5, verse 5, He said, "Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth." Gentleness is not weakness. It's power under control, the ability to remain steady without being provoked into anger or bitterness. Imagine being in a team meeting when someone makes a mocking comment about your faith. You could respond with frustration or resentment, but instead, you choose to remain calm, maybe even stay silent. That response shows that your faith isn't dependent on their approval or acceptance. Often, A quiet, respectful reaction speaks louder than a heated reply. Another crucial step is to constantly remember why you do what you do and for whom you do it. If your motivation for sharing your faith is to impress others, any criticism will quickly discourage you. But if your reason is to honor the Lord, no insult or rejection can shake that foundation. Hebrews chapter 12 verse 3 gives us this encouragement. Consider him who endured such hostility from sinners against himself, lest you become weary and discouraged in your souls. Fixing our eyes on Jesus, who endured rejection and opposition far greater than ours, gives us strength not to give up when we experience the same. It's natural to feel disheartened when others don't understand your faith or when you're targeted by ridicule. In those moments, prayer becomes your best refuge. You don't have to carry that burden alone. You can bring it to God, asking Him for peace and wisdom to respond with grace. Philippians chapter 4 verse 6 reminds us, "Be anxious for nothing, but in everything by prayer and supplication, with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God." Another way to stay strong is to seek support from other believers. Sometimes what wears us down the most isn't the opposition itself, but the feeling of being isolated. Even having just one fellow believer at work or a friend outside the office to pray with can make a huge difference. Ecclesiastes chapter 4 verse 9 says, "Two are better than one, because they have a good reward for their labor." Walking this journey with someone else strengthens your spirit and reminds you that you're not facing these challenges alone. It's also important to recognize the difference between legitimate opposition and unnecessary conflict. Sometimes we unintentionally create friction by being pushy or by sharing our faith at inappropriate times. Opposition that arises from impatience or lack of wisdom is not the same as the resistance that comes from living faithfully. This is why discernment matters. Let your conduct speak first. Wait for the right moment. And when you speak, do so with respect and sensitivity. Peter's words in 1 Peter chapter 3 verse 15 are a perfect guide for these moments. Always be prepared to give an answer to everyone who asks you to give the reason for the hope that you have, but do this with gentleness and respect. This verse shows that we're not called to argue or force our beliefs on others. We're called to be ready, but always with kindness and reverence. Opposition at work doesn't always come in the form of open hostility. Sometimes it shows up in subtle ways: co-workers excluding you, quiet sarcasm, or small remarks meant to discourage you. Don't let these things dim your light. Jesus said in Matthew chapter 5 verse 14, "You are the light of the world. A city that is set on a hill cannot be hidden." Light isn't meant to retreat from darkness. It exists to shine even brighter in it. Another life-changing practice is to pray for those who oppose you. Jesus' teaching in Matthew chapter 5 verse 44 says, "Love your enemies, bless those who curse you, do good to those who hate you, and pray for those who spitefully use you and persecute you." Praying for those who criticize or mock you doesn't just bring peace to your own heart. It also allows God's love to work through you in ways you might never see. Staying firm in your faith is not something that happens overnight. It's a journey of spiritual maturity. Each experience of opposition is an opportunity to grow stronger, to trust God more deeply, and to demonstrate that your faith is genuine. Ultimately, remember that you're not called to convince everyone. You're called to be faithful. Speaking about God at work isn't about winning debates. It's about living in such a way that your presence points others to Him. Even in the midst of criticism, God is working in your heart and in the hearts of those who are watching you.